The year was 2387. Humanity had been part of the Galactic Union for exactly 41 years. 41 years of showing up to meetings. 41 years of signing treaties. 41 years of sitting at the long silver table inside the Union's Grand Council chamber on the space station called Valoris Prime and being laughed at. Not always loudly. Not always rudely. But always clearly. It started the first day humans arrived. Their ship, the USS Cardinal, docked at Valoris Prime with a crew of 12. Commander James Holt led them out, a tall, broad-shouldered man from Ohio with steady brown eyes and a firm handshake. He had trained for 20 years for this moment. He had memorized every known alien language, every protocol, every custom. He had prepared for everything. He had not prepared for the laughter. The Drathian ambassador, a 7-foot creature with gray-scaled skin, for arms and orange glowing eyes, looked at James and made a sound like crackling ice. The universal translator took a second, then converted it simply. This is the species that claims to be dangerous? The Valorian council members, tall, thin beings with pale blue skin and wide silver eyes, exchanged looks and made soft musical tones that translated as polite amusement. The Korath delegates, squat and armored with thick purple shells, simply turned away as if the humans weren't worth watching. James Holt smiled. He extended his hand toward the Drathian ambassador. Commander James Holt. On behalf of Earth, it is an honor to be here. The Drathian stared at the extended hand for a long moment. Then it turned to its aide and said something the translator caught as, "Why is it reaching at me? Is it begging?" More laughter. Quiet but clear. James kept his hand steady. He kept his smile. And when no one took his hand, he simply lowered it and walked to the human seat at the far end of the table, the seat that was, by no coincidence, the smallest chair in the chamber and the farthest from the center. That was day one. Over the next 41 years, things did not improve much. Humans were admitted to the Galactic Union as a Class 4 species, the lowest category. Class 4 meant no voting rights on major decisions. Class 4 meant no access to advanced weapons treaties. Class 4 meant humans could attend meetings, nod along, and go home. They were allowed to trade basic goods, food, water, raw minerals. The Union considered Earth a supplier planet, not a partner. "You are young," the Valorian High Chancellor Sorath once told the human delegation. "You have been on your planet for, what, 200,000 years? The Drathians have existed for 9 million years. The Valorians for 12 million. You are infants. We do not give infants weapons and voting rights." The human ambassador at the time, a woman named Dr. Rachel Kim, had nodded calmly. "We understand," she said. "We are patient." Sorath had smiled, the thin, distant smile of someone who does not truly believe the person in front of them matters. "Good," he said. "Patience is wise for a species of your limitations." Those limitations were a favorite topic at Valoris Prime. Humans were too small. Humans were too fragile. Humans lived too short, 70, 80, 90 years, while Drathians lived 800 and Valorians lived 2,000. Humans had weak eyes, weak ears, no natural armor, no claws, no venom. They could not survive in space without suits. They could not survive extreme temperatures without machines. They needed sleep, 8 hours every single cycle, which the other species found both baffling and hilarious. They shut down for a third of their lives, a Korath general once said in a Union briefing, and the whole room had buzzed with amusement. How do they guard anything? How do they fight anyone? They just go unconscious. They are emotional, too, a Drathian scientist had written in a famous paper that circulated the Union. They cry water from their eyes. They form deep attachments to other creatures, even non-intelligent ones. They keep small animals in their homes for companionship. They appear to be driven as much by feeling as by logic. This makes them unpredictable but ultimately not threatening. Unpredictable but not threatening. That was what the galaxy thought of humans. And for 41 years, the humans sat at their small chair at the far end of the table, traded their minerals, attended their meetings, and said very little. No one noticed what they were doing in the quiet. No one thought to ask. The human who would change everything was not a general, He was not a politician. He was a 34-year-old engineer from Denver, Colorado, named Marcus Cole. Marcus was not physically impressive. He was 5'10", medium build, with dark curly hair that he never quite managed to comb properly and a habit of drinking too much coffee. He wore glasses that he could have had corrected but simply liked. He laughed easily and loudly, often at things other people didn't find funny yet. He was the kind of man who explained complicated things with his hands and got so excited about ideas that he sometimes forgot to eat. He had been working for a program called Project Ember for 6 years. Almost no one outside the program knew it existed. On a cold Tuesday morning in February of 2387, Marcus Cole sat in a gray underground facility beneath the Nevada desert and looked at a glowing screen that showed 6 years of calculations finally coming together. He picked up his coffee. He took a long sip. Then he said, very quietly, to the only other person in the room, his colleague and closest friend, Dr. Sarah Vance, a thin woman from Georgia with sharp eyes and ink-stained fingers. "Sarah, I think we did it." Sarah looked up from her own screen. She looked at his screen. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Marcus, if that number is right, it's right. Then we just changed everything." "Yeah," Marcus said. He set down his coffee. "We did." He did not laugh. He did not cheer. He just sat there for a moment, looking at what they had built, and felt something settle in his chest, something that felt very much like the quiet before a storm. No one in the Galactic Union had ever thought to ask a simple question: what do humans do when no one is watching? It was an oversight born from arrogance. The Drathians watched human military movements and saw outdated warships, short-range weapons, and a military budget they considered laughable compared to their own. The Valorians scanned Earth's energy output and found it unremarkable: fusion reactors, solar grids, orbital stations running on standard power. The Korath Intelligence Division had filed a report on humanity 5 years ago that concluded, humans pose no strategic threat within the next 2 centuries. Recommend continued Class 4 status and standard monitoring. Standard monitoring. That was the mistake. Standard monitoring looked at what was visible. Standard monitoring counted ships and measured weapons and tracked energy signatures. Standard monitoring did not look underneath. It did not look into the quiet, deep underground facilities scattered across 6 continents where the best human minds had been working, not on weapons, not on ships, but on something the rest of the galaxy had never even considered trying: physics itself. Here was what the rest of the galaxy understood about faster-than-light travel. It was possible, but it required a scythium core, a crystalline mineral found only in 3 star systems in the known galaxy, all of which were controlled by the Drathians. A scythium core was the engine of every FTL drive in existence. It was how the Drathians had expanded their empire. It was why every species in the Galactic Union depended on Drathian trade routes. Without Scythium, you were limited to sublight travel, which meant decades between star systems, which meant isolation, which meant weakness. Humans had been requesting Scythium trade rights for 30 years. They had been denied every time. "You don't have the technology to use it properly," the Drathian trade minister had told human ambassador David Park 8 years ago. "Scythium cores in untrained hands are dangerous. We are protecting you." David Park had nodded politely. "Of course," he had said. "We understand." What David Park knew, and the Drathian trade minister did not, was that Project Ember was not trying to build a Scythium drive. It was trying to make Scythium obsolete. The concept was called fold drive theory. The idea was not new. Human physicists had been writing about it for over a century. The theory said that instead of traveling through space at faster-than-light speeds, a ship could fold space itself, compress the distance between 2 points until they were effectively touching, then pass through. No Scythium needed. No exotic mineral required. Just mathematics, energy, and a very, very precise understanding of how space-time behaved under extreme conditions. Every other species in the galaxy had looked at fold drive theory at some point. Every one of them had reached the same conclusion: the energy requirements were impossibly high. The calculations were too complex. The margin for error was so small, a fraction of a percent, that even the most advanced Drathian computers could not solve the stabilization equation. It was a beautiful idea, they all agreed. And it was completely impossible. They had stopped trying 3 million years ago. Humans had started trying 60 years ago. And what humanity had that no other species had accounted for was something that showed up in every field they touched, something that the Drathian scientist's paper had actually mentioned and completely misread. The paper had called it being driven by emotion. It had called it unpredictable. What it actually was obsession. Human scientists did not stop when a problem was hard. They did not file reports saying something was impossible and move on. When a human scientist hit a wall, something in them, some deep, stubborn, burning thing, made them hit the wall again. And again. And again, differently each time, from different angles with different tools, sleeping less than they should, eating less than they should, scribbling on napkins and whiteboards and the backs of their hands. Other species called this irrational. Humans called it Tuesday. Marcus Cole had been hitting the wall of full drive stabilization for 6 years. He had failed 2,847 times by his own count. He kept a notebook, an actual paper notebook, which his colleagues found charmingly strange, where he wrote every failure down with a short note about why it failed and what he would try next. The notebook had 412 pages. Page 412, entry 2,847 read, resonance frequency at 0.0003 was still off. Try inverting the harmonic buffer approach. Sleep on it.
He had slept on it.
He had woken up at 3 a.m. with a solution already forming in his head, stumbled to his desk in the dark, and written 7 pages of equations before he was fully awake. That was 3 weeks before the February morning, when he told Sarah they had done it. Project Ember was not just Marcus and Sarah. At its peak, it was 412 scientists from 22 countries, all working under the strictest secrecy protocols Earth's governments had ever imposed. They had physicists, engineers, mathematicians, material scientists, computer architects, and 3 people whose only job was to check everyone else's math, because when Marcus said the margin for error was a fraction of a percent, he was not being dramatic. The project director was a 60-year-old woman named General Elena Vesquez, though she hadn't been a general in the traditional sense for 15 years. She had moved from military command to scientific oversight because, as she once told Marcus, the most dangerous battlefield in the galaxy right now is a whiteboard. Elena was not a scientist herself. She was the person who made sure the scientists had everything they needed, protected the project from political interference, kept the secret airtight, and made the decisions that scientists shouldn't have to make. She was also the person who, on that cold February morning, received a single encrypted message from Marcus that read, "The equation is solved. Full stabilization achieved in simulation. Ready for hardware phase." Elena read the message twice. She set it down. She stood up from her desk, walked to the window of her office, and looked out at the Nevada desert for a long, quiet moment. Then she picked up a secure phone and made one call. "Mr. President," she said, "it's time." 3 months after Elena Vesquez made that call, the Galactic Union held its quarterly council session on Valoris Prime. These sessions were largely ceremonial for humans. Ambassador Laura Chin, a calm, precise woman from San Francisco who had held the role for 9 years, would attend, sit at the small chair at the far end of the table, listen to the major species debate, and vote on things that affected the entire galaxy, and have no say in any of it. Occasionally, she would be invited to give a brief report on Earth's trade contributions. She would give the report. The council would nod. The session would continue without her. It had been this way for 41 years. This session started the same way. The Drathian ambassador, High Commander Vreth, the newer, younger Drathian than the ones who had laughed at James Holt 4 decades ago, but carrying the same casual contempt, opened the session by announcing that Drathia had expanded its Scythium mining operations in the Tauran system and would be increasing prices on Scythium cores by 40%. The Valorian and Korath delegations objected mildly. There was negotiation. Vreth smiled the way powerful people smile when they know the negotiation is already over. The price increase was eventually settled at 32%. The Korath delegation looked unhappy. The Valorian Chancellor Sorith looked resigned. Laura Chin said nothing. A 32% Scythium increase would raise Earth's FTL travel costs significantly, They leased Scythium cores through a Valorian trade partner since Drathia wouldn't deal directly with them. But this was not the moment. She sat quietly and took notes. Then the session moved to its second item, a proposal by the Drathian delegation to reclassify 3 uninhabited star systems in the Outer Rim as Drathian sovereign territory. Laura raised her hand. Every head in the room turned. It was rare for the human ambassador to raise a hand for anything other than a procedural question. Chancellor Soreth looked at her with mild surprise. Ambassador Chen, you have a comment. A question, Laura said. Her voice was pleasant and unhurried. 2 of those 3 star systems are currently listed as open territory under the Union's Outer Rim Expansion Charter. The charter gives any Class 2 species, or higher, the right to petition for settlement rights. I'm curious, is this proposal going through the standard charter petition process, or is it being presented as a direct annexation? There was a brief silence. High Commander Vreth turned slowly to look at her. The Drathian Empire has strategic interests in those systems. The charter allows for exceptions under the Strategic Sovereignty Clause. The Strategic Sovereignty Clause, Laura said, requires a demonstrated security need. Has Drathia filed a security need assessment with the Union Secretariat? Another silence. Slightly longer this time. These are formalities, Vreth said, and his tone carried a clear message. You are a Class 4 species, and this is not your concern. Of course, Laura said pleasantly. I only ask because Earth would like to formally register an interest in one of those systems, the third one, Outer Rim Sector 7 Gamma, under the same charter. As a matter of record. The room was quiet in a different way now. Not hostile, just surprised. No Class 4 species had ever formally registered an interest in anything at a council session. Soreth looked at her for a moment. You are petitioning for settlement rights in the Outer Rim? Just registering an interest, Chancellor. For the record. Laura smiled. As is our right under Article 14 of the Union Charter, which applies to all member species regardless of class. Vreth made the crackling ice sound. The translator rendered it as a short, dismissive laugh. Your ships cannot even reach the Outer Rim on their own. You would need to lease Scythium cores through a partner, cores that are about to become significantly more expensive. He looked amused. This is a gesture, Ambassador. A symbolic gesture. Perhaps, Laura said, but it is a legal one. I would like it on the record. Soreth studied her for a long moment. There was something in his silver eyes, not respect, not exactly, but a flicker of something new.
Curiosity, maybe.
Very well, he said. Let the record show Earth's interest in Outer Rim Sector 7 Gamma. He looked at his aide. Noted. The session continued. No one gave it another thought. No one understood that Laura Chen had just laid the first piece of a very long game. After the session, as the delegations filed out through the wide corridors of Valoris Prime, Ambassador Kale of the Valorian Outer Worlds delegation, a younger Valorian, quieter than most, who had always observed the humans with more attention than his colleagues, fell into step beside Laura. Ambassador Chun, he said, may I ask you something? Of course. Why register the interest in 7 Gamma? Vreth is right that you cannot reach it without Scythium. It accomplishes nothing practical. He paused. Unless you know something we don't. Laura glanced at him. In 9 years, no alien diplomat had ever asked her a question like that. She considered him for a moment, the curiosity in his pale blue face, the sharpness behind his silver eyes. She smiled. Ambassador Kale, she said, have you ever watched humans play chess? He blinked. I am not familiar with. It's a game, she said. A very old one. 2 players. The goal is to corner the other player's most important piece. She paused at the corridor junction. Humans don't just play for the next move. We play for the move 15 turns from now. She tilted her head slightly. Have a good afternoon, Ambassador. She walked away. Kale stood at the corridor junction and watched her go, and for the first time in his long diplomatic career, he felt something he rarely felt when dealing with humans. He felt uncertain. The hardware phase of Project Ember took 8 months. It was the longest 8 months of Marcus Cole's life. Not because the work was slow, it was actually moving faster than anyone had projected, but because of what he understood about what they were building. Every morning he drove to the facility, badged in, took the elevator down 4 floors underground, and sat down in front of the most world-changing piece of engineering in human history, and he felt the weight of it pressing down on him constantly. He did not talk about this weight with many people. His team was brilliant and focused, and they did not need their lead engineer having a philosophical crisis in the middle of a hardware build. But at night, alone in his apartment in Henderson, Nevada, he thought about it a lot. He thought about what a fold drive meant. Not just for Earth, for the galaxy. Right now, the Drathians controlled the galaxy because they controlled Scythium. Every other species depended on them for FTL travel. That dependency was the lever that let Drathia set prices, claim territories, push smaller species around, and maintain their position at the top of the Galactic Union's unofficial power ranking. It was a stranglehold that had lasted for thousands of years. A fold drive, a working, stable fold drive, broke that stranglehold completely. It didn't just give humans independence. It gave every species in the galaxy the option of independence. No more Scythium leases. No more Drathian trade routes. No more 40% price increases announced with a casual smile in a council chamber. Marcus had not built a weapon. He had built something more powerful than a weapon. He had built leverage. And he understood, in the quiet of his apartment, that leverage this large was also danger this large. The Drathians would not accept it quietly. No species that had held power for thousands of years ever did. He brought this up to Elena Vasquez one evening when they were both working late, the facility quiet around them, most of the team gone home for the night. "I think about what happens after," Marcus told her. He was sitting on the edge of a workbench, turning a coffee cup around in his hands. Not the reveal. After the reveal, the Drathians are going to see this as a direct threat to their position. They're going to push back hard. Elena leaned against the opposite bench and folded her arms. She had the calm of someone who had thought about this far longer than he had. "Yes," she said simply. "They will. So, we need to be ready for that." "Marcus," she said, "we have been ready for that for 3 years." He looked at her. "What does that mean?" She considered him for a moment. Then she said, "You know your job. You built the drive. Let me do my job."
She paused.
"Do you trust me?" Marcus thought about it. Not as a polite gesture, actually thought about it because Elena Vasquez was not the kind of person you answered with a polite gesture. "Yes," he said. "Then keep building," she said. "And stop thinking about the politics. That's my headache." He nodded. He finished his coffee. He went back to work. But he kept thinking about it because that was what Marcus Cole did. He could not turn off the part of his brain that ran every scenario forward, that looked at a thing and immediately started mapping every consequence down the line. It was what made him a brilliant engineer. It was also what made him a poor sleeper. The test of the first full-scale fold drive prototype happened on a Wednesday afternoon in October, 11 months after Marcus and Sarah had solved the equation. The test ship was a small vessel, barely the size of a passenger plane, called the HFY Prometheus. It had no crew. It was loaded with sensors and cameras and a very expensive array of scientific instruments. The destination was a 0.7 light minutes from Earth's position, close enough to observe with advanced telescopes, far enough to constitute a genuine fold. The control room was packed. Every member of the Ember team, who could fit, was there. The rest watched on screens in the hallway. Some people were holding hands. One engineer, a 40-year-old man named Tom Briggs who had been on the project since year 1, was visibly shaking. Marcus sat at the primary console. Sarah sat beside him. He ran the checklist one final time. Systems nominal. Fold coils charged. Stabilization buffer holding at target frequency. Energy output steady. He looked at Sarah. She looked back at him. Her eyes were bright. "Ready," he said. "Ready," she said. Marcus pressed the activation sequence. There was a sound, not an explosion, not a roar, but a deep, resonant hum that built for about 3 seconds, rising in pitch, filling the room, vibrating in their chests, and then a light. A brilliant, white blue light that flooded the cameras trained on the Prometheus from outside the facility. And then the ship was gone. The room went completely silent. Every screen, every sensor array, every telescope trained on the destination point lit up simultaneously. The Prometheus was there, 7 light minutes away, intact. Every instrument reading nominal. Travel time, 0.3 seconds. Tom Briggs stopped shaking. He sat very still and stared at the screen. Then Marcus Cole, who almost never cried, who prided himself on being calm under pressure, who had held it together through 2,847 failures and 6 years of grinding work, put his face in his hands and wept. Not from sadness. From something that had no simple name. Relief and pride and awe and exhaustion all hitting at once, all at the same time, like a wave he had been bracing against for 6 years finally breaking over him. Sarah put her hand on his back. Around them, the room slowly came back to life. People standing, people cheering, Tom Briggs laughing so hard he slid out of his chair. Someone popped a bottle of champagne they had apparently been hiding in a cabinet for exactly this moment. Elena Vasquez stood at the back of the room, arms folded, watching it all with a quiet, steady expression. When Marcus finally looked up, still wiping his face, and found her eyes across the room, she gave him a single, small nod. "We did it." He nodded back. "Yeah, we did." In the 4 months between the successful Prometheus test and Earth's decision to reveal the full drive to the galaxy, General Elena Vasquez was the busiest she had ever been in her life. The political work happened in layers. First, the president of the United Earth Council, a composed, sharp-minded woman named President Mara Okafor, had to be brought fully into the picture. She had known about Project Ember at a classified level for years, but now she sat through a full technical briefing with Marcus and Sarah and the senior Ember team, and when it was over, she sat quietly for a long time and then asked one question. How long before another species could reverse engineer this? Marcus answered carefully. The drive itself, someone could get close in maybe 2 years if they had our published mathematics and dedicated their best teams to it. But the stabilization equation, that's the hard part, and that stays classified. Without the stabilization equation, a full drive tears the ship apart. The equation is the key, not the drive. President Okafor nodded slowly. So, we control the key. For now, Marcus said. Eventually they'll solve it. That's inevitable. But we have a window. The president looked at Elena. And your recommendation? We do not give them the key, Elena said. Not for free. Not all at once. We use the window. The second layer of work was military. Earth had not been idle in the years of Project Ember. While the science team worked underground, the Earth Defense Force had been quietly rebuilding, not with Drathian-style massive warships, but with something different. Faster, smarter, and designed from the ground up to work with full drive technology. Ships that could fold in, strike, fold out. Ships that made every conventional military tactic in the galaxy's playbook partially obsolete. By the time of the Prometheus test, Earth had 47 fold-capable warships in advanced construction and 12 already completed and undergoing systems testing. They were called the Shadow Fleet within the EDF because they had been built in facilities on the dark side of the moon and in 3 asteroid belt stations, none visible to standard Galactic Union monitoring. Admiral James "Jem" Reeves, a career military man with a shaved head and a quiet intensity that made junior officers nervous, commanded the Shadow Fleet. He was not a man who gave speeches. He led by example and communicated in short, direct sentences. When President Okafor briefed him on the timeline for the reveal, he said 3 things. I need 60 more days for systems integration. I need the diplomatic team to have a plan for the first 24 hours after we announce. And I need someone to tell Ambassador Chen exactly what to say and when. That last one is already handled, Elena told him. Jim Reeves nodded. Then I'll have my 60 days. The third layer was Ambassador Laura Chen herself. Laura flew back to Nevada 2 months before the reveal date. She met with Elena, President Okafor, Admiral Reeves, and Marcus in a secure conference room buried 6 floors underground. They talked for 11 hours over 2 days. When it was over, Laura sat quietly for a moment and then said, "I want to be the one who tells Soreth." "You will be," President Okafor said. "Not through a message. Not through a formal announcement. I want to tell him face to face. In the council chamber. With everyone watching." Elena looked at her. "Is that the right play?" "It's more confrontational then." "It's not confrontational," Laura said. "It's honest. The Drathians will spin this as a threat no matter how we present it. We cannot control their narrative. What we can control is the image, the memory every species in that room walks away with." She paused. "When they think back on the day everything changed, I want them to remember a human ambassador, sitting calmly in a small chair at the far end of the table and speaking clearly." She looked at the table. 41 years they put us in that chair to make us feel small. I want to use that chair one last time. I want every species in that room to realize they misjudged us from that chair. The room was quiet. Then Marcus Cole, who was the most junior person in the room and had probably not been expected to speak, said, "She's right." Everyone looked at him. He looked a little embarrassed.
Sorry.
She's right. The image matters. We should let her do it her way." Elena looked at Marcus. Then at Laura. "Her way it is. There is a particular kind of waiting that is different from ordinary waiting. It is the waiting you do when you know that what is about to happen will divide the world into before and after. When you know that every ordinary moment you are currently living is about to become, in your memory, the time before. It presses on you differently. It makes you notice small things more. The way coffee smells. The specific sound of wind outside a window. The feeling of regular days. Marcus noticed this in the final weeks. He took longer walks. He called his mother in Denver more often. He sat on the roof of his apartment building some evenings and looked up at the sky, the dark Nevada sky full of stars, and thought about what those stars were about to become for humanity. No longer distant impossibilities. No longer places you could theoretically reach in decades on a borrowed ship with Lithium. Just destinations. Just places you could go. He thought about James Holt extending his hand on that first day 41 years ago, and no one taking it. He thought about all the quiet, patient years in between. He thought of SY and JHY, as his grandmother used to say, an old phrase from her first language that she'd always translated loosely as, "From this moment, everything is mine to carry forward." She'd said it when she retired after 40 years of work. She'd said it when she walked out of the hospital after surviving cancer. He'd grown up hearing it as the sound of a person choosing to claim their next chapter. He looked at the stars. Of SY and JHY, he thought. From this moment forward, the Galactic Union quarterly session was scheduled for a Thursday. Ambassador Laura Chen arrived at Valoris Prime early, 2 hours before the session. She went to her delegation's small office, poured herself a glass of water, and sat down. She did not review notes. She did not rehearse. She had been over everything so many times in her head that any more preparation would have been noise. She was wearing the standard human diplomatic dress uniform, navy blue, simple, with the Earth insignia on the left shoulder. She had worn it to every session for 9 years. Today it felt different on her. Not heavier, cleaner somehow, like it finally fit exactly right. At the hour before the session, Ambassador Kale of the Valorian Outer Worlds delegation knocked on her office door. He was one of the only aliens who ever came to the human delegation's office. Most didn't bother. "Ambassador Chen," he said. He looked at her with his careful silver eyes. "Something is different today." She looked up at him. "Is it? You are calmer than usual." He paused. "Not your surface calm. Your real calm. There is a difference." He tilted his head. "Something is happening." Laura considered him for a moment.
Kale was not like the others.
He had always watched the humans with genuine curiosity, not contempt. Over 9 years, she had come to respect him quietly. "Kale," she said, "after the session today, whatever happens, I would ask you to remember that humans have never wanted to be anyone's enemy. We have only ever wanted to be equals." He was very still for a moment. "That is a strange thing to say before a routine session." "Perhaps," she said, "but I wanted you to hear it." He stood in her doorway for another moment, that uncertainty flickering in his eyes again, the same uncertainty she had seen in him the day she mentioned chess. Then he nodded once and left. The session opened with standard union business. Trade reports. A minor border dispute between two Class II species in the Middle Rim. A Valorian proposal to expand the union's medical exchange program. Laura sat in her small chair at the far end of the table and listened and waited. 40 minutes into the session, during a pause for translation of a complex Korath trade motion, Laura Chen said, "Chancellor Sorath, I have a matter to bring before the council." The pause stretched. Several heads turned. High Commander Vreth looked at her with the expression of someone who sees a minor inconvenience. Sorath raised one pale hand in a gesture of permission. Laura stood up. This alone was unusual. Human ambassadors almost never stood to address the council. There was no formal requirement to, but it was an understood thing. Class 4 species did not stand to address the chamber as if making a declaration. They spoke from their seats, briefly, and sat back down. Laura Chen stood. 41 years ago, she said, and her voice was clear and unhurried, carrying through the chamber's perfect acoustics. Commander James Holt extended his hand to this council and was met with laughter.
He sat in this chair.
He represented a species that this union categorized as limited, undeveloped, and non-threatening. She paused. On behalf of Earth, I would like to correct that last assessment. The room was very quiet. 3 days ago, Laura said, Earth successfully completed the 53rd operational test of a technology we have developed over the past 11 years. We call it the full drive. She let that sit for exactly 2 seconds. For those unfamiliar with the theoretical framework, the full drive does not use lithium. It does not use any externally sourced exotic material. It generates its own field using a stabilized harmonic resonance system that our engineers developed independently. Another pause. In 53 operational tests, including 26 manned tests over the past 3 weeks, the full drive has achieved an average transit time of 0.3 seconds per fold, with an operational range of up to 40 light-years per fold. The drive is fully functional, fully stable, and currently installed on 12 commissioned vessels of the Earth Defense Force. Complete silence. We are prepared, Laura said, to register a formal reclassification petition from Class 4 to Class 1, under Article 30, one of the Galactic Union Charter, which allows any species to petition for reclassification upon demonstrating technological parity with existing Class 1 members. She looked around the table. I believe we have demonstrated it.
She sat down.
For approximately 4 full seconds, no one in the chamber made a sound. Then High Commander Vreth made a noise. It started as the crackling ice laugh, the same dismissive sound James Holt had heard 41 years ago, and the universal translator started to render it as "this is absurd, a Class 4 species cannot." And then Vreth stopped, because his aide had just pressed a data chip into his hand. A chip carrying a message from Drathian Intelligence Command, flagged urgent, received 30 seconds ago. Vreth read it. The crackling ice sound died completely. The message read, confirmed FDL drive signatures detected in Earth orbit, non-Scythium-based. 12 vessels confirmed. Pattern analysis indicates full drive technology is operational. This is not a bluff. Vreth looked up from the chip. He looked at Laura Chen, sitting calmly in the small chair at the far end of the table. And for the first time in 41 years of these sessions, the Drathian ambassador looked at the human ambassador and did not laugh. The silence after High Commander Vreth read his intelligence report lasted only a few seconds, but it was the kind of silence that everyone in the room felt in their bones, the kind that meant something had just fundamentally shifted, and every being present was scrambling to catch up to the new reality. Chancellor Sorath was the first to recover. He was 2,000 years old and had seen empires rise and fall, not personally, but through the deep institutional memory of Valorian leadership. He recognized a pivot point when it arrived. His silver eyes moved from Laura Chen to Vreth and back, and something in his expression changed. Not dramatically, not with shock, but the way a great old tree bends slightly in a new wind. Ambassador Chen, he said carefully, these are significant claims. You understand that independent verification will be required before any reclassification process can begin. Of course, Laura said. We welcome it. Earth will provide full access to the Fold drive for technical review by any union-appointed scientific body. We will also transmit drive signature data, test records, and navigation logs for the past 3 weeks. Full transparency. She paused. We have nothing to hide. We have nothing to hide. In context, the phrase landed perfectly, because hiding was exactly what 41 years of being ignored had allowed them to do. The Korath General Brath, who had never once directly addressed the human delegation in Laura's 9 years, leaned forward. The Korath communicated through a combination of sound and color patterns in their shells. The translator rendered his tone as controlled but urgent. 12 vessels, you said. Fold-capable vessels. What are the combat specifications? Laura looked at him evenly. That information falls under Earth Defense Force classification protocols. I'm sure you understand. Brath's shell flickered a complex pattern. The translator rendered it as, "You are saying you have warships we cannot assess." "I am saying we have ships," Laura said calmly. "As does every Class 1 species in this chamber." The Korath general sat back. His shell went through several rapid color changes. The translator politely declined to render directly, but the emotional content was clear. Recalibration. Rapid and uncomfortable recalibration. Ambassador Kale, sitting in the Valorian secondary delegation seats off to the side of the main table, was watching all of this with an expression that was difficult to read. His silver eyes moved between Laura and Sorath and Vreth, tracking every reaction. He was thinking Laura knew. He was the fastest thinker in the room in some ways, certainly faster than Vreth, whose entire worldview was currently trying to reorganize itself around a data chip. Vreth finally spoke. His voice had lost the smooth contempt it usually carried. It was controlled, but controlled in the effortful way, the way of someone managing something. The Drathian Empire would require full independent verification before accepting any reclassification claim. A species does not simply announce a new technology, and the technology exists, a voice said. It wasn't Laura who spoke. It was Ambassador Dean of the Solari, a quiet, small blue-skinned species who held Class 2 status and had always been careful around the Drathians. Dean almost never spoke in open session. Every head in the chamber turned. Dean was looking at a data screen in front of them. Our orbital monitoring array picked up the energy signatures from Earth's space 3 cycles ago. We filed them as anomalous and did not understand what we were seeing. They looked up. We understand now. The signature pattern matches theoretical Fold drive energy output within 5%. A pause. The humans are not bluffing. The room shifted again. When a witness comes from the least expected direction, it carries more weight than a dozen allied voices. The Solari had no reason to support humanity and no history of doing so. Their confirmation landed in the room like a stone into still water, ripples moving outward, touching everything. Vretha's composure cracked, just slightly, just for a moment. Just enough for everyone watching to see it crack. The Solari's monitoring array is, he began. Accurate, Dean said simply. Chancellor, I move that we begin verification proceedings immediately. With respect, this chamber cannot continue its current agenda as if nothing has changed. Sorath looked at the table for a moment. Then he said, seconded. The vote for immediate verification proceedings passed with 8 in favor, 2 abstentions, and 1 against. High Commander Vreth voted against. He was the only one. The session broke for recess, while the verification motion was processed. The chamber cleared quickly, every delegation huddling with its aides, screens lighting up, urgent transmissions flying back to home systems. The noise in the corridor outside was unlike anything Laura had heard in 9 years of these sessions. Laura stayed in her chair. She poured herself a glass of water from the pitcher on the table, the small pitcher that was always placed at the human delegation's spot, always smaller than the pitchers placed for other species, a detail no one had ever noticed or thought to change. She drank slowly and looked at the empty chamber around her. She thought about her first day in this chair, 9 years ago. Her predecessor, Ambassador David Park, had handed her the role with a briefing document and a single piece of personal advice. Don't expect them to see you. Just be there. Be consistent. Be ready. She had been there. She had been consistent. She had been ready. Caro, she thought, another old word, one she had learned from her mother, who had learned it from hers. In her family, it meant something like here, now, present, a reminder to stand in the moment you're in rather than the one you're wishing for. Her mother had said it when Laura was 7 years old and crying because the other kids at school made fun of her lunch.
Caro, baby.
You're here. That's enough. She was here. She finished her water and waited for the recess to end. Cale found her in the corridor during the recess. He walked toward her with the particular quick but measured stride of someone who wants to get somewhere before they change their mind.
Chess, he said. He was slightly out of breath.
You said humans play 15 moves ahead.
I did, she said.
How many moves ahead was this? She considered. The fold drive theory? About 60 years ahead, give or take. She paused. The drive itself about 11 years. The decision to reveal it here, in this chamber, at this session? She met his eyes. About 9 years. Cale absorbed this. You have been planning the announcement since your first day as ambassador. Not the specifics, but the principle, yes. We always knew the day would come. My job was to make sure we were standing in the right position when it did. She looked at him steadily. Ambassador Cale, what happens next, in the verification process, in the reclassification hearing, will matter enormously. Not just for Earth, for the structure of this union. He was quiet for a moment. You are saying the Drathians will try to block it. They will try to slow it, complicate it, question every measurement, challenge every test result. They will not accept a world where Scythium is no longer their monopoly.
She paused.
And they will be afraid. Fear makes powerful people dangerous. What do you need from the Valorian delegation? He asked.
Direct.
No pretense. Support in the verification process. Make sure it is clean and fair. That's all. She held his gaze. Humans have never wanted enemies, Cale. We don't want Drathia as an enemy either. But we will not be managed anymore. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I will speak with Chancellor Soreth.
Thank you, she said.
He turned to go, then paused. Ambassador Chen, for what it is worth, I am glad it is you who brought this news. Someone with less patience might have brought it as a weapon. You brought it as a door. Laura looked at him. I learned from 41 years of watching what closed doors do to people, she said quietly. I would rather open one. High Commander Vreth left Valoris Prime within 6 hours of the council session. He did not stay for the verification proceedings. He filed a formal Drathian abstention from the initial verification panel, citing conflict of interest due to competitive technology interests, which was technically a valid legal move under Union rules, and which translated plainly as, we do not accept this, and we are not going to participate in making it official. He returned to the Drathian homeworld of Drathis Prime, and within 48 hours was standing before the Drathian High Council, 12 of the most powerful beings in the galaxy, ancient and armored, and accustomed to getting what they wanted. The briefing he gave them was not pleasant. There was a period of silence after he finished that Vreth found more uncomfortable than any shouting would have been. Then the eldest council member, Warlord Craven, 900 years old, battle-scarred, and possessed of a patience that could bend iron, spoke. How long have they had it? Operational testing began approximately 4 months ago, Vreth said. The underlying science, our analysts estimate 11 years of active development. We found no intelligence indicator of the project.
He paused.
We were not looking. We had no reason to. We had every reason, Craven said quietly. We chose not to look because we decided they were not worth watching closely.
He was still.
That was our error. Silence. 12 vessels currently, Vreth said. Our analysts project they can build more quickly. The drive technology, once established, scales rapidly. Within 18 months. Within 18 months, they can have a fleet that does not need our routes, our cores, or our permission to travel anywhere in this galaxy. Another council member said. Commander Deva, sharp-edged and 40 years younger than Craven, her voice carrying a controlled fury that was almost worse than open anger. They will offer the drive technology to the Solari, to the Korath, to every species that has ever resented Scythium pricing. They will dismantle our economic foundation from underneath us. Yes, Craven said. They will. He looked at the table. Unless we act before they can. The room went very still. What kind of action? Vreth asked carefully. Craven looked at him. The kind that reminds the galaxy that being clever does not make you powerful. 4 days after the council session, a Drathian diplomatic vessel transmitted a message to Earth's orbital station. It was addressed to President Okafor and copied to the Galactic Union Secretariat. The message was long and formally worded, but its content was simple. The Drathian Empire demanded that Earth submit all fold drive research, technology, and intellectual property to a joint Galactic Union Technology Review Panel, to be chaired by a Drathian representative, on the grounds that the drive represented a potential threat to established interstellar navigational infrastructure. Under a clause in the Union Charter most humans had never heard of because it had never been invoked before. The clause, Article 77, subsection C, had been written 300 years ago specifically to prevent any single species from deploying technology that could, theoretically, destabilize Union trade routes. It had been written, ironically, by the Drathians themselves. For 3 centuries it had sat unused, because no species had ever developed anything the Drathians felt threatened by. Now they were pointing it at humanity. President Okafor read the message in the Oval Office with Elena Vasquez, Admiral Reeves, and Laura Chin, who had flown back to Earth immediately after the council session. She read it once, then set it down. They're asking us to hand over the drive, she said. They're ordering us to, Elena said. Or they'll block the reclassification process indefinitely and push for economic sanctions against Earth through the Union framework. The sanctions provision requires a majority vote, Laura said. They don't have the votes. Not yet, Elena said. But they can make Soratha's life very uncomfortable and split the Valorian bloc if they apply enough pressure. Don't underestimate them. They've been playing this game for 9 million years. Admiral Reeves, who had been quiet, said, Ma'am, they're not just posturing. We're picking up Drathian fleet movements. 3 battle groups, previously positioned at Torrent system. They've moved. Everyone looked at him. Moved where? President Okafor asked. Toward the outer rim. Toward Sector 7 Gamma. He paused. Toward the territory ambassador, Chin filed an interest in. The room was quiet. Then Laura said, very softly, That's not about 7 Gamma. No, Elena agreed. It's about whether we blink. President Okafor looked at the Drathian message for another long moment. Then she looked at Admiral Reeves. Where is the Shadow Fleet? Ready, he said. 2 syllables. Complete sentence. She nodded slowly. She looked at Elena. Draft response to the Drathian message. Formal, polite, and completely firm. She paused. Tell them Article 77 was designed to prevent monopolistic technology suppression, not protect it. Tell them we look forward to discussing the interpretation with the full council. Another pause. And tell them Earth's interest in Sector 7 Gamma stands. Elena allowed herself a small smile. Yes, ma'am. 6 days after the Drathian message, 3 Drathian warships crossed into Sector 7 Gamma. They were not small ships. They were Wrath-class heavy cruisers, each one over 2 kilometers long, armed with enough firepower to flatten a mid-sized moon. They moved slowly and openly, making no attempt at stealth, broadcasting a standard Drathian territorial claim signal on all Union frequencies. It was a message. Come stop us. Admiral Reeves was in the EDF command center on the far side of the moon when it happened. He watched the sensor feeds for 30 seconds. Then, he picked up a secure link to President Okafor. They're in 7 Gamma, he said. I see it, she said. Orders? A pause.
Jim.
What does responding look like? 2 options, he said. 1. We send a delegation vessel. Diplomatic response.
Slow.
They've claimed the territory on record before we can get there. 2. We fold in. He paused. If we fold in, we're demonstrating the full capability in a confrontational context. That changes the stakes. Another pause. Longer. If we don't fold in, President Okafor said slowly, what does that tell them? That we have the drive, but we won't use it under pressure, Reeves said. which tells them the drive is a paper threat. He kept his voice flat and factual. Ma'am, with respect, you cannot have leverage and refuse to demonstrate it. Leverage only exists if the other side believes you'll act. She was quiet for a moment.
One ship, she said.
Non-armed, fold-capable vessel. No weapons hot. I want presence, not escalation. Understood. Reeves paused. The Drathians will not have seen a fold before. In person. Up close. Good, the president said. Let them see it. The EDF vessel Resolute, one of the 12 commissioned fold-capable ships, was a sleek, medium-sized craft carrying a crew of 38. Its commander was Captain Diana Torres, 42, from Houston, Texas, with 17 years of deep space experience and the particular steadiness of someone who had been in dangerous situations often enough that danger was simply a condition of work, not a reason for panic. Diana received her orders, reviewed them with her XO, a quiet man named Lieutenant Felix Owens, and addressed her crew in 30 seconds. We're folding to Sector 7 Gamma. 3 Drathian heavies are sitting on a Union-contested territory. Our job is to show up, broadcast our presence on all channels, and establish that we have as much right to be there as they do. We are not starting a fight. We are ending the idea that we can be pushed around without consequence. She looked at her crew. Any questions? No questions. Then let's go. The fold took 0.3 seconds. The 3 Drathian Wrath-class cruisers were holding position in a triangular formation over the barren rocky surface of 7 Gamma's primary body when the Resolute appeared. It did not approach from a distance. It did not enter the system from the edge and travel in. It simply was not there. And then, with a flash of white-blue light and a deep resonant pulse that every sensor on every Drathian ship registered simultaneously, it was there. 1,200 kilometers off the lead cruiser's port bow. Present. Complete. Undamaged. The Drathian bridge cruise had approximately 4 seconds of stunned stillness. Diana Torres broadcast on all standard Union frequencies, her voice calm and clear. This is Captain Diana Torres of the EDF Resolute. We are here on behalf of the Earth Defense Force, in support of Earth's registered interest in Sector 7 Gamma under Article 14 of the Galactic Union Charter. We have noted the presence of Drathian vessels in this territory and are formally requesting clarification of your purpose here, as required under Union protocols. She paused. Please respond at your convenience. The 3 Drathian ships were silent for 47 seconds. Diana counted them. Felix, beside her, was very still. The bridge crew held their positions without any visible tension, professional, focused, steady. This was what Admiral Reeves had chosen these 38 people for. Then the lead cruiser responded. The voice that came through was a Drathian battle captain, gruff, deep, with a slight hesitation of someone who had just watched something happen that they had no category for. Resolute. You folded. Not a question. More like a person saying words out loud to make them real. Yes, Diana said. Another pause. How far? 14 light years. Diana said pleasantly. We appreciate the spacious sector. Nice rock formations on the primary body. Earth has a geological survey team interested in the mineral content. She let that sit for exactly 1 second. Is there anything we can help you with out here, or were you just passing through? Felix Owens turned away from his screen and pressed his fist to his mouth to control himself. Diana did not look at him. The Drathian battle captain did not respond for a full 2 minutes. Then, we are conducting routine operations. Wonderful, Diana said. We'll just be here then, conducting ours. The Resolute held position. After 40 minutes, the 3 Drathian Wrath-class cruisers turned and left the sector. Diana watched them go. When they were clear of sensor range, she exhaled slowly, leaned back in her chair, and said, Felix, log it. Felix Owens, who had recovered his composure, nodded. Logged, Captain.
He paused.
For what it's worth, that last line. We'll just be here then. I'm going to be thinking about that one for a while. Diana allowed herself a small smile. I've been saving it for 9 years, she said. Had a feeling I'd need it someday. The departure of the Drathian fleet from Sector 7 Gamma was not a small event. Within 6 hours, every major species in the Galactic Union had received sensor data from the encounter: the Resolute's fold arrival, the standoff, the Drathian withdrawal. The data was clean and undeniable. 3 of the most powerful warships in the galaxy had been met by a single, unarmed human vessel that had materialized from 14 light-years away in 0.3 seconds, and the warships had left. This was not how things worked in the Galactic Union. Not under 9 million years of Drathian dominance. The machinery of the galaxy, the trade routes, the politics, the quiet understanding of who deferred to whom, had been built on the premise that Drathia was the strongest force in the room. Everything else, every treaty, every alliance, every pricing arrangement, every territorial claim, was downstream from that premise. The premise had just been publicly questioned. It had not been destroyed. Not yet. The Resolute was 1 ship, and the Earth Defense Force was 12 commissioned vessels against a Drathian fleet of thousands. Pure numbers still heavily favored Drathia. But numbers had never been the only factor in power. The ability to move, to appear anywhere, instantly, without warning, without using any Drathian infrastructure, made Earth's 12 ships a strategic variable that no existing military doctrine was designed to counter. You could not blockade an enemy that could fold around your blockade. You could not intercept ships that were not approaching from any direction. You could not protect a target against a strike that had no flight time. The galaxy understood this slowly, over those 6 hours. And the understanding changed the air. Ambassador Kale sent Laura Chen a private message the evening after the 7 Gamma incident. It was short. It said, "Chancellor Sorath wants to meet with you privately before the reclassification hearing. He will not say this formally, but he wants to understand what Earth's intentions are, and he wants to hear it from you directly. I am recommending that he trust you. I hope you will give me reason to continue recommending that." Laura read it twice. Then she wrote back, "Tell him I will meet wherever and whenever he chooses. And tell him, from me, not as ambassador but as a person who has sat in that chamber for 9 years, that Earth does not want to replace one dominant power with another. We want a table where everyone has a real seat, including species that have been in the small chair." She sent it, then sat back and thought about what she had written. It was true. She believed it. But she also understood that believing something and building something were different tasks, and that the work of making that vision real, a galactic union where Class 4 was not a permanent sentence, where one species could not hold the galaxy's travel network hostage, where power was not just about who had existed longest, that work was not done. It was barely begun.
Caro, she thought.
Here.
Now.
This moment, then the next one. Back on Earth, Marcus Cole was watching the 7 Gamma footage, released to the public after a brief security review, on his laptop in his apartment. He watched the fold arrival 14 times. That white-blue flash. The deep resonant pulse. The Resolute appearing out of nothing 14 light-years from where it started. He had built that. He and Sarah and 400 other people had spent 6 years building the mathematics that made that flash possible, and 8 months building the hardware and 53 tests confirming it worked, and now it was there on his screen, in a real star sector, in a real standoff, doing exactly what they had built it to do. He called Sarah. She picked up on the second ring. "I've watched it 12 times, she said before he could speak. 14 for me, he said. She laughed. They were both quiet for a moment, watching the same footage on separate screens in separate apartments. "Hey," Sarah said. "Do you remember failure number 1204? He groaned softly. The resonance buffer, that completely melted. "And you wrote in the notebook, 'This is fine. Everything is fine. The buffer is fine. I am fine.'" He paused. "And then you brought me a sandwich and told me to go home. You stayed for 4 more hours." "I know." A short silence. "Marcus," Sarah said. "We did a good thing." He looked at the screen. The Resolute hanging in space. 14 light-years from where it had started. Present. "Yeah," he said. "We did." There was a person who watched the 7 Gamma footage differently from everyone else. Tom Briggs, the engineer who had been shaking so hard during the Prometheus test that he'd slid out of his chair, had a brother. His name was Ryan Briggs, and he was 40 years old, and he had spent most of his adult life as a cargo hauler on the Union's Scythium-dependent trade routes. Ryan had never worked for Project Ember, never had clearance for anything classified. He was just a working man who flew supplies between systems on leased Scythium routes and paid a significant portion of his income for the privilege of Drathian-controlled cores. Tom had not been allowed to tell Ryan about Project Ember. For 6 years, he had kept this secret from the person he was closest to in the world. When the news broke, when the footage aired, and the world understood what had happened, Tom called Ryan. Ryan answered on the third ring, and Tom could immediately tell from his voice that Ryan had been watching the footage too. "Tommy," Ryan said.
His voice had something complicated in it.
"Hey," Tom said.
"The full drive."
"All those years." A pause. "You knew?" Tom was quiet. "Yeah," he said. "I knew." Another silence. "Were you on it?" Ryan asked. "The project?" "Yeah." "How long?" 6 years, Tom said. Ryan was quiet for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice was different, thicker, like someone pushing words past something heavy. "Do you know what it's like, Tom? Being out there on those routes, paying Drathian prices, having them treat you like you're nothing, like you're cargo yourself, not a person with a route and a job and a life."
He paused.
"I have said things to their customs officials that I am not proud of. Things I said because I was angry and tired and I had no power and they knew I had no power." Another pause. "And this whole time, 6 years, you were down there, building you a door out of it," Tom said softly.
"Yeah."
"That's what it was." Ryan was quiet for what felt like a full minute. Then he said, "Ab SYMJHY, Tommy. Ab SYMJHY." He said it like a breath coming back into his lungs after a long time of held air. From this moment, everything moves forward. Tom leaned against his kitchen counter and pressed his hand over his eyes. "Yeah," he said. "Ab SYMJHY re. Ab SYMJHY." The formal reclassification hearing took place 3 weeks after the 7 Gamma incident. It was held on Valoris Prime, in the same council chamber where 41 years of small chairs and quiet condescensions had accumulated. The chamber was different today. Not in its physical structure. The long silver table was the same, the lights the same, the seats arranged in the same order. What was different was the air in it. Every delegation had arrived early. Every delegation had brought its full team. The Drathians were present. This surprised some observers. After Vretha's abstention from the verification proceedings and the 7 Gamma confrontation, many had expected another boycott. But Warlord Craven himself had come. Not Vreth, Craven, the elder statesman, the 900-year-old military architect of much of Drathian policy for the last 3 centuries. His presence meant one thing. Drathia had decided that trying to block this would cost them more than trying to shape it. Laura Chen noticed this immediately. When she entered the chamber, she noticed Craven, immense, ancient, gray-scaled and battle-marked, sitting in the Drathian senior seat with the stillness of a continent. He looked at her when she entered, not with contempt, not with the dismissive amusement of Vreth, with the appraising look of someone assessing a situation. She met his gaze briefly, nodded with respect, and went to her seat, her last time in the small chair. The verification panel, chaired by a Valorian scientist named Sova with representatives from 6 species, had completed its work in 11 days. Their report was thorough and unambiguous. The full drive was real. The technology was stable. Earth's drive capability was verified across all 53 test records and 4 independent tests conducted by the panel itself. The panel had also reviewed Earth's military capabilities, the 12 commissioned vessels, the 47 in advanced construction, and had submitted those findings under sealed cover to the Council. Chancellor Sorath read from the panel's summary report, his voice measured and careful. The technology was genuine, the capabilities were as described, and the panel found no evidence of deception or misrepresentation in Earth's presentation. He set the report down. "The reclassification petition from Earth is before this Council," he said. "Under Article 30(1) of the Galactic Union Charter, the Council will hear statements from the petitioning species, from any species wishing to address the petition, and then proceed to a vote." He looked at Laura. Ambassador Chen, you may begin. Laura stood. She had thought about what to say for 3 weeks. She had drafted and discarded 7 versions of a speech. What she finally decided to say was simple. 41 years ago, she said, Commander James Holt sat in this chair and represented a species that this council believed was too young, too fragile, and too small to matter. He was patient. Every human ambassador who came after him was patient. We did not protest our classification loudly. We did not demand what we had not yet earned. We worked. She paused. We worked in the way humans work, which is to say, we did not stop when it was hard, and we did not stop when others told us it was impossible, and we did not stop when we failed, because the one thing humans have always understood is that failure is not the end of a problem. It is information about the problem. She looked around the chamber. At Soreth, at Craven, at Kale, at Brath and Dean, and every face that had looked at the human seat for decades as an afterthought. We are not here to threaten anyone. We are not here to replace a hierarchy with another hierarchy. We are here because 41 years ago, James Holt extended his hand, and it was not taken. We are asking this council to take it now, not as a favor, as an acknowledgement of what humans have always been and what we have proven, beyond question, that we are. She paused one final time. We are ready. She sat down. The chamber was quiet in a way it had not been in a very long time. Quiet not from indifference, but from attention, from being genuinely moved. Then Warlord Craven spoke. His voice was like old mountains, deep and settled, accustomed to its own weight. I have led Drathian strategic policy for 300 years, he said. In that time, I have made many correct assessments. I have also made errors. He paused. He looked at Laura Chen. Humans were our greatest error. Another pause. We saw a species that cried water from its eyes and slept a third of its life and kept animals for comfort, and we called this weakness. We did not understand that a species which feels deeply and loves fiercely and rests so that it can rise again is not weak. His orange eyes moved slowly around the table. It is, in ways we never calculated, unstoppable. The room was very still. The Drathian Empire, Craven said, will not oppose this reclassification. He paused. We will also request a diplomatic summit with Earth at the earliest opportunity. There is much we should have discussed 41 years ago. He looked at Laura. We are prepared to begin. The vote was 11-0. One abstention, the Korath general, who was not yet ready to say yes, but was not willing to say no. Earth was reclassified as a Class 1 species, effective immediately. For the first time in 41 years, a new seat appeared at the Galactic Union Council table. Not at the far end. Not the smallest chair in the room. A full-size seat, in the center, between the Valorian and Solari delegations. Laura Chen walked to it slowly. She ran one hand along the arm of it for just a moment, feeling the material, the weight of it, the reality of it. Then she sat down. She looked around the table from the new seat. The chamber looked completely different from here. She thought of James Holt. She thought of David Park. She thought of every human ambassador who had sat at the small chair and been patient and consistent and ready. She reached forward and poured herself a glass of water from the center table's pitcher, the large one, the one that had always been too far away to reach from the far end. She took a slow drink. Caro, she thought. Here.
Now.
6 months after the reclassification, a young Drathian diplomat named Kalen was assigned to the Galactic Union Station on Valoris Prime as part of the Empire's new diplomatic cohort, a generation of younger Drathians being sent into Union roles after Craven's summit with Earth, as part of what was being called the new course in Drathian foreign policy. Kalen was 27 years old, sharp and curious, deeply shaped by everything that had happened in the preceding months. He had grown up hearing that humans were limited, undeveloped, non-threatening. He had read the famous Drathian scientific paper, the one about emotion and unpredictability, as a student and accepted its conclusions without much thought because everyone accepted them. They were received wisdom. He did not accept them anymore. On his second day at Valoris Prime, Kalen was in the station's common observation deck, a wide curved room with a transparent wall showing the stars, when he encountered a human for the first time in person. The human was a young man, maybe 25, dark-haired and slightly rumpled, holding a cup of something hot and staring out at the stars with a slightly unfocused look of someone deep in thought. His uniform identified him as part of the New Earth Diplomatic Technical Liaison Team, one of the scientists and engineers who had been posted to the Union Station since reclassification. Kalen stood near the door for a moment. He thought about the footage he had watched of the Resolute folding into Sector 7 Gamma. He thought about Warlord Craven's words in the council chamber, unstoppable, and the weight with which they had landed, coming from the most powerful strategic mind in Drathian history. He walked over. "Excuse me," he said. His translator rendered his words in clean English. "You are from the Earth delegation?" The young man turned. He had dark eyes and a slightly startled expression, the look of someone returned from deep thought to the present. Then he smiled. Easy, open, warm.
"Yeah."
"Marcus Cole, well, not that Marcus Cole. My uncle's the famous one. I'm just Marcus Jr." He gestured at himself. "Confusing family naming decisions. You get used to it." Kalen blinked. "Your uncle is the engineer who built the fold drive?" "Yep." Marcus Jr. turned back to the stars. "He keeps telling me to go into physics. I'm more of a materials guy." He glanced at Kalen. "You're Drathian, right? First time seeing one of you in person." "And you are the first human I have met in person," Kalen said. He paused. "I would like to apologize." Marcus Jr. looked at him. "For what?" "For what my people said about yours. For a very long time." He looked at the stars, the paper, the laughter, the small chair. He paused. "I know it is not mine personally to apologize for, but I want to say it." Marcus Jr. was quiet for a moment. He looked at the young Drathian diplomat, at the genuine discomfort in his orange eyes, the earnestness that sat awkwardly on a species not designed for visible earnestness. "Hey," Marcus Jr. said. "You know what my uncle says about failure?" Kalen looked at him. "He says it's information. Not the end of the problem. Information about the problem." He shrugged. "Every bad thing that happened between our people for 41 years, that's information. About what not to do. About what to build differently." He extended his hand. Kalen looked at the extended hand. A human extended hand. In the Galactic Union's common room. Offered to a Drathian. He had read about James Holt extending his hand on the first day, 41 years ago. The way it had been left hanging. The way the translator had rendered the Drathian response as, "Is it begging?" He reached out and shook it. "Kalen," he said. "Marcus," the young human said. "Junior." "Unfortunately." He grinned. "Come on, I'll show you how humans make coffee. It'll be the best thing that's happened to you this year." Kalen looked at the coffee cup in the young man's hand. The entire galaxy knew humans had an attachment to that particular beverage. He had always found it inexplicable. "I am willing to attempt it," he said. They walked toward the station's canteen together, a Drathian diplomat and a human engineer, in the common corridors of Valoris Prime, talking in the easy way of two young people finding, against all historical probability, that they had things in common. Somewhere on Earth, in a Denver suburb, Marcus Cole, the real one, the one with the notebook and the 412 pages of failures, was sitting on his back porch in the early evening. He had a cup of coffee. His mother was inside. He could hear the TV through the door. He was looking at the sky. It was a clear evening. The stars were sharp and close-looking, the way they got on high-altitude evenings when the air was dry. He could see the band of the Milky Way if he looked toward the right part of the sky, that dense shimmer of 10 billion stars, most of which were reachable now. Not in decades. In seconds. He thought about the notebook. About page 1, the first entry, 6 years ago. Theoretical model complete. Begin hardware parameters. The margin is 0.0003, tighter than anything ever attempted. This will take a while. It had taken a while. He thought about Sarah, who is in Geneva now, receiving a joint Nobel Prize in Physics with him next month, an award they had politely accepted on the condition that all 412 members of the Ember team were included in the citation. The committee had said yes. He thought about General Elena Vasquez, who had retired 2 weeks after the reclassification and was reportedly growing tomatoes in New Mexico and reading novels she had been putting off for 15 years. He thought about Admiral Reeves, who was still in uniform, commanding the growing Earth Defense Force, which now included 63 fold-capable vessels and growing, with the same short sentence, complete thought efficiency he had always had. He thought about Laura Chun, sitting in the center of the Galactic Union Council table. Her new seat. The seat she had earned for all of them. He thought about Ryan Briggs, Tom's brother, who had quit the Scythium trade routes 3 months ago and was now flying an independent route for the first time in his life, in a small personal vessel with a modest fold-drive unit, going where he wanted on no one else's schedule, paying no one for the right to cross the distance between stars. Of SYMJHY, Marcus thought. From this moment forward, he took a sip of his coffee. The stars were just there, present and close and real, the way they had always been but not always felt. He thought about how strange it was that the thing that had changed everything had not been a weapon or an army or a declaration of war. It had been a notebook with 412 pages and a quiet Tuesday morning and 2 people in a room saying, "I think we did it," with no one watching. That was how humans worked, not in the spotlight, not with permission, not waiting for someone to tell them they were allowed. Quietly, stubbornly, obsessively, emotionally, getting up after every failure with information instead of defeat, building something real in the dark, page by page, test by test, until the day the light came on and the whole galaxy had to look. He finished his coffee. He went inside. In the years that followed, the fold drive changed everything, as it was always going to. Scythium prices fell as Drathia negotiated new terms in a galaxy where their monopoly was no longer the only option. The Solari developed their own drive variant within 2 years, as Marcus had predicted, using the published mathematics Earth had released as a diplomatic gesture. 3 other species followed within 5 years. The Galactic Union restructured its class system entirely, not abolished, but reformed, with pathways and timelines and real criteria rather than the vague permanence that had kept species like humans at the far end of the table for generations. The small chair was removed from the council chamber. It was not thrown away. Ambassador Laura Chun had it placed in the Galactic Union's history archive, with a simple plaque that read, "The chair that held us, 2346 to 2387. May no chair hold anyone again." No one who read it laughed. No one dared.
The end.